Let me introduce myself. My name is Claire Harper, and if you're reading this, I'm about to tell you a story that will make your blood boil, your heart race, and maybe even inspire you to take back what's rightfully yours. It all started 3 days before my bonus, a bonus I had worked tirelessly for over the past year. A bonus they promised me when I signed on with Crestwood Enterprises, one of the biggest names in corporate America. Crestwood wasn't just any company. It was the company everyone wanted to work for. Or at least, that's how it seemed from the outside. Glass walls, sleek furniture, free coffee bars stocked with almond milk. Everything screamed success. And trust me, I wanted to be part of that world more than anything. When I first got hired as an account manager, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. The pay was decent, the benefits were good, but most importantly, there was this unspoken promise. If you worked hard enough, stayed late enough, and delivered results, you'd get rewarded. That reward came in the form of a year-end bonus. A hefty check meant to acknowledge everything we sacrificed for the company's bottom line. But here's the thing no one tells you about places like Crestwood. They don't care about loyalty. Not really. They care about numbers, projections, quarterly reports, and making their shareholders happy. If you don't fit into their perfect little equation anymore, well, let's just say goodbye isn't always said politely. The day it happened, I walked into the office feeling confident. Confident because I knew I'd done everything right. Over the last 12 months, I'd closed deals worth millions for Crestwood. I brought in clients other teams couldn't touch. I worked weekends, skipped vacations, and answered emails at midnight like it was my job, which technically it was. But none of that mattered when I stepped into the conference room that morning. "Claire," said Mr. Grayson, our VP of operations, his tone clipped and cold. He gestured toward the chair across from him, avoiding eye contact. "Please sit down." I did as he asked, though something about his demeanor made my stomach twist. There was another executive with him, Ms. Langley, head of HR, and she wouldn't meet my eyes either. Classic setup. 2 against 1. I already knew where this was going. "We've reviewed your performance over the past year," Mr. Grayson began, folding his hands neatly on the table. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "And while we appreciate your contributions, we've decided to go in a different direction." "A different direction?" I echoed, my voice sharper than I intended. "What does that mean?" "It means," Ms. Langley interjected gently, though her words cut deep, "that effective immediately, your position has been eliminated." "Eliminated?" I repeated, stunned. "Just like that? After everything I've done for this company?" They exchanged glances, neither offering an explanation beyond vague corporate jargon about restructuring and budget cuts. But I wasn't buying it. This wasn't about budgets or efficiency. It was about saving face, cutting costs by firing people who dared to ask for raises or promotions, people like me. As they handed me a severance package folder, complete with a confidentiality agreement I was expected to sign, I felt numb. How could they do this? 3 days before my bonus. 3 days before Christmas, no less. It was cruel, calculated, and utterly heartless. Walking out of Crestwood that afternoon felt surreal. I carried my belongings in a cardboard box, just like in those cliched movies, except this wasn't fiction. This was real life. The weight of betrayal pressed down on me as I stepped onto the sidewalk, blinking against the harsh December wind. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications from coworkers pretending to be shocked. "OMG, are you okay?" And automated reminders about upcoming meetings I'd never attend again. For the next 48 hours, I wandered through a fog of anger and disbelief. I cried in the shower, avoided calls from my family, and stared blankly at the wall while reruns of old sitcoms played in the background. Then, on the 3rd night, something shifted inside me. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was desperation, but whatever it was, it sparked an idea so bold, so audacious, that it scared me even as it excited me. It started with a single question. What if they forgot something? You see, Crestwood prided itself on being cutting-edge, innovative, and efficient. But sometimes, the bigger the machine, the easier it is to overlook the small details. And as I sat there scrolling through old emails, reviewing contracts, and poring over employee handbooks, I realized they might have made a mistake. A tiny, insignificant oversight that could change everything. According to the terms of my employment contract, bonuses were tied not only to performance, but also to tenure. Specifically, Anyone employed by Crestwood on December 25th automatically qualified for their full year-end bonus, regardless of whether they remained with the company afterward. In other words, if I could prove I was still technically employed on Christmas Day, even for a single second, I'd be entitled to every penny they owed me. Now, here's the catch. Crestwood hadn't officially terminated my access yet. My email account was still active. My keycard still worked. Even my login credentials for the internal database hadn't been revoked. To the system, I was still an employee. All I needed to do was exploit that loophole long enough to secure my bonus. The plan formed quickly after that. First, I'd need to gather evidence proving my continued employment status. Emails, timestamps, anything that showed I hadn't been fully removed from the system. Next, I'd bide my time until Christmas Eve, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Finally, once December 25th rolled around, I'd trigger the sequence of events that would ensure Crestwood couldn't wiggle out of paying me. Of course, executing this plan wouldn't be easy. For starters, I had to stay under the radar. One wrong move, and they'd shut me out completely. Second, I needed allies, people within the company who could help without realizing it. Fortunately, Crestwood's culture of gossip and petty politics worked in my favor. Everyone loved to talk, especially when they thought no one was listening. Over the next few days, I became a ghost. I stopped responding to texts from former colleagues and deleted social media apps from my phone. Instead, I focused on infiltrating Crestwood's digital infrastructure, using my knowledge of their systems to gather intel. Late at night, when the office was empty, I logged in remotely and sifted through files, searching for anything that could bolster my case. One evening, while combing through archived emails, I stumbled upon something unexpected, a thread between Mr. Grayson and Ms. Langley discussing layoffs. At first glance, it seemed routine, but buried in the exchange was a nugget of gold. They mentioned concerns about morale during the holiday season and emphasized the importance of timing terminations strategically. Bingo! Proof that my firing wasn't random. It was deliberate, designed to avoid paying bonuses. Armed with this information, I reached out to someone I trusted implicitly, Rachel, a junior analyst in IT whom I'd mentored early in her career. Rachel was smart, resourceful, and fiercely loyal, exactly the kind of person I needed on my side. Using a burner phone, I texted her cryptically, asking if she'd meet me for coffee the following morning. When we sat down at a quiet cafe near her apartment, Rachel looked both confused and concerned. "Claire, what's going on?" "I need your help," I said bluntly, sliding a USB drive across the table. "There's something you need to see." Her brow furrowed as she examined the drive. "Is this illegal?" "No," I assured her, "but it might ruffle some feathers." After explaining the situation, not sparing any details, I watched as realization dawned on her face. "Wow," she murmured. "That's messed up." "Exactly," I replied, "which is why I need your expertise. Can you find out if my termination process is complete? Like officially official?" Rachel hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I can try, but if I get caught—" "You won't," I interrupted, leaning closer, "because we're not doing anything wrong. We're just double-checking the paperwork." She smirked despite herself. "You sound like a lawyer." "Good," I shot back. "Then let's hope it works." With Rachel's help, I confirmed that my termination hadn't been finalized. According to the system, I was still listed as an active employee. Better yet, Rachel discovered that Crestwood's payroll department operated on a strict schedule, processing payments automatically based on predetermined criteria. If I timed things correctly, I could slip through the cracks unnoticed. Christmas Eve arrived faster than I anticipated. As families gathered around trees and children hung stockings by chimneys, I prepared for the final stage of my plan. Dressed in dark clothes and armed with determination, I slipped into the Crestwood building using my keycard. The lobby was eerily quiet, lit only by the soft glow of emergency lights. Security guards patrolled sporadically, but I knew their routines well enough to avoid detection. Once inside, I headed straight for the server room, where Rachel had arranged temporary access for me under the guise of routine maintenance. My hands trembled slightly as I plugged in my laptop, navigating the labyrinthine network until I found what I was looking for: the master employee roster. There it was, plain as day: Harper, Claire, status, active. A surge of triumph coursed through me as I uploaded the necessary files to lock in my employment status permanently. Now all I had to do was wait. As midnight approached, I positioned myself in a secluded corner of the office, watching the clock tick closer to Christmas Day. Outside, snowflakes drifted lazily through the air, painting the city in shades of white. Inside, the hum of computers provided a steady backdrop to my thoughts. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice, about standing up to a system that treated people like disposable assets, about proving to myself and to Crestwood that I was worth far more than they gave me credit for. Finally, the clock struck 12, December 25th. Officially, I was still employed, and thanks to a forgotten detail, I was about to claim what was rightfully mine. But just as I allowed myself a moment of victory, a shadow moved in the hallway. Footsteps echoed faintly, growing louder with each passing second. Someone was coming. The footsteps grew louder, each one sending a jolt of panic through my body. I froze, my breath caught in my throat as I tried to think fast. Whoever was approaching couldn't find me here, not now, not when I was so close to pulling this off. I glanced around the dimly lit office, searching for a place to hide. The server room door was still slightly ajar behind me, but slipping back inside would mean risking being cornered if they decided to investigate further. Instead, I ducked under a nearby desk, pulling my coat tightly around me and praying that the darkness would conceal me. The footsteps stopped just outside the doorway. A flashlight beam sliced through the gloom, sweeping across the walls before landing on the server room entrance. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure it would give me away. "Security check," a gruff voice called out, followed by the sound of keys jingling. It was one of the night guards making his rounds. He lingered for a moment, shining his light into the server room, then muttered something unintelligible before moving on. I exhaled slowly, my muscles finally relaxing as the sound of his retreating steps faded into silence. Once I was certain he was gone, I crawled out from under the desk, shaking off the adrenaline rush. That had been too close, too reckless, but there was no turning back now. I'd come this far, and I wasn't about to let fear, or a nosy security guard, stop me. By morning, the city woke up to Christmas Day celebrations, oblivious to the quiet rebellion unfolding within Crestwood's walls. Sitting at home with a steaming cup of coffee in hand, I refreshed my email inbox obsessively, waiting for confirmation that the payroll system had processed my bonus. Hours ticked by, each minute stretching longer than the last. Just when I started doubting whether my plan had worked, an email notification popped up. It was from Crestwood's HR department. Subject: year-end bonus payment confirmation. My hands trembled as I opened the message. There it was, plain as day, a detailed breakdown of my bonus payment, along with a direct deposit confirmation. They hadn't even questioned it. According to their records, I was still an employee on December 25th, and therefore entitled to every penny owed to me. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly replaced by a fierce sense of satisfaction. I'd done it. Against all odds, I'd beaten them at their own game. For once, the corporate machine hadn't crushed me. It had tripped over its own greed. But as much as I wanted to revel in my victory, I knew this wasn't the end. Crestwood might not have realized their mistake yet, but it was only a matter of time before someone noticed. And when they did, they wouldn't take it lightly. I needed to prepare for whatever came next. 2 days later, my phone rang. An unknown number flashed across the screen, but I answered anyway. "Hello." "Miss Harper," said a clipped, authoritative voice on the other end. It was Mr. Grayson. His tone was icy, devoid of any warmth or holiday cheer. "We need to discuss your recent transaction." "I'm sorry," I replied coolly, leaning back in my chair. "What exactly are you referring to?" "You know damn well what I'm talking about," he snapped. "Your bonus payment. Care to explain how you managed to receive it after your termination?" I smiled to myself, savoring the moment. "Oh, is there a problem?" "Because according to my employment contract and Crestwood's own systems, I qualified for the bonus. You can check the records if you don't believe me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Grayson spoke again, his voice was laced with thinly veiled anger. "This isn't over, Claire. We'll be reviewing this matter thoroughly." "Of course," I said sweetly. "Take all the time you need." In the meantime, Merry Christmas. And with that, I hung up. Over the following weeks, Crestwood launched an internal investigation into the incident. They combed through emails, scrutinized payroll logs, and grilled anyone remotely connected to my case. But they found nothing incriminating. Everything I'd done fell within the boundaries of their own policies, leaving them powerless to reclaim the money they'd already paid me. Meanwhile, word of my corporate revenge spread quietly among former colleagues. Some were shocked. Others admired my audacity. Rachel reached out occasionally, updating me on the chaos unfolding within the company. Apparently, Grayson and Langley were facing scrutiny from higher-ups for their mishandling of the situation. Karma, it seemed, had a way of finding people like them. As for me, I used the bonus to start fresh. I invested in myself, taking courses, networking, and eventually launching my own consulting business. It wasn't easy, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Free from the toxic culture of corporate politics, free from the fear of being undervalued, and free to define success on my own terms. Looking back, getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to confront the truth about who I was and what I deserved. It taught me that sometimes the greatest victories come not from playing by the rules, but from rewriting them entirely. So here's my advice to anyone reading this. Never underestimate the power of a forgotten detail. Sometimes, all it takes is one small oversight to turn the tables, and remind the world that loyalty should always be a two-way street.